With a new form of government taking shape at City Hall and every seat up for grabs, Austin voters elected 2 new city council members on November 4th and sent 16 council candidates, plus 2 vying for Austin mayor, to runoff elections. Tonight, beyond the rhetoric, we ask the remaining candidates what makes them the right person to lead their district and our city.
Support for Civic Summit comes from Google, a global technology leader focused on improving the ways people connect with information. And also by Texas Mutual Insurance, providing workers' compensation for Texas employers.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for Civic Summit, City Council Runoff Conversation District 4, a joint production of KLRU, Leadership Austin, KUT, and the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life. I'm Michael Kanin, publisher of the Austin Monitor. Coming up, we have 2 candidates running for Austin's District 4. You can join the conversation by using the hashtag CivicSummitD4. District 4 is a North Austin community bordering the Breaker Lane entrance to I-35. It runs all the way down just north of Rumberg Lane, down to just north of Rumberg Lane. On the east side, some parts touch DeSalle Road. On the west, it runs between Metric and Burnett Lane. This district is primarily composed of an older Hispanic population, while at the same time having one of the largest populations of kids 10 years old or younger. Our first candidate is Greg Casar. Greg is the son of Mexican immigrants and a native Texan. He currently works as a community organizer in Austin. The candidate running against him is Laura Pressley. Laura has lived in Austin for the past 26 years. She's worked in the semiconductor industry as an engineer for 17 years. Thanks to both of you for being here. Our discussion tonight will focus on leadership. Consider this a job interview. We want to know what skills and qualities you would bring to City Hall. This discussion is not being conducted in an unofficial debate manner, but we're asking the candidates to be respectful of each other's time and limit their answers to about a minute. First question, which was shared with both candidates before tonight: what have you learned about yourself over the last 4 months campaigning that will help you govern? And we'll start with Greg.
Well, thanks so much for having us, Mike and KLRU. Something that I've learned while campaigning has been how folks are looking for a leader who listens. And while me and my team were really dedicated to talking to folks door to door, over 25,000 doors were knocked by myself and my team throughout this campaign. Something that I started doing less and less was just talking about my policy ideas or the vision that I might bring to the city, because I found that folks wanted much more to bring their vision forward. And where I connected most with constituents and everyday Austin residents was at the end of the conversation, when I'd scribble my cell phone number down on a piece of paper and hand it to them and let them know that they could give me a call on my cell phone. And I have learned that within our district we have so much talent, so many great ideas, so many hardworking, energetic people. I'll give you 2 brief examples. One is Pete Aikenhead, who lives in the northern end of District 4. In the early 60s, he moved back to his home state of Arkansas to fight the segregationists that had held on to the state government there. He worked as an organizer for years, and because of his hard work and the work of others, they ended segregation in that state, got universal kindergarten in that state, their first minimum wage in that state, and ended the poll tax. And now he lives in District 4, but has been felt unengaged from city government, and now he's a regular volunteer and someone who can really bring his years of experience to solving Austin's problems of today. And then my other friend, Jose, was someone that I've worked with for years at Workers Defense Project. At age 19, he was injured in a construction accident that almost took his life and almost ended his ability to provide for his young family. And I got the chance to work with Jose to connect him with the head of government affairs for Apple Incorporated, worldwide head of government affairs, and talk to him about if Apple was going to be building a new headquarters here in Austin, how important it was for those jobs to be safe jobs. And Apple stepped up and raised safety standards for all of their thousands of workers because of interactions with folks like Jose. And so I know that no one leader can solve the problems of District 4 or of our city. There's no simple answers or easy solutions, but as someone who listens and connects the talent and energy that exists within District 4 and across our city, folks that have too often been ignored at City Hall, I believe that we can begin to tip the scales by harnessing the great spirit we have in Austin. And so that's something that I've learned. I really want to be able to bring out in myself and bring out in others.
Thanks, Greg. Laura?
Yes, thank you for having us, and thank you for everybody's time this evening coming here. You know, District 4 is an amazing district, and the diversity is absolutely just off the chart, from religious groups to ethnic groups to political groups. And I think what is really important in District 4 is someone who can bring all these groups together in an inclusive manner. And that's one of the things I've done from a leadership standpoint. I've spent 17 years in the semiconductor industry. I've worked globally with companies and diverse populations across the world. So it's a challenge, because you have to kind of extend yourself and be tolerant of a different kind of perspective than your own. And so you have to have that open mind. And a lot of that is something that's not just automatic. One of the things that I learned about District 4 is it's amazing through the seasons of my life. I'm 51 years old. I have a PhD in chemistry. And I didn't start out that way. I came to Austin as a single mom. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. And so much I have in common with District 4 that I didn't really realize at a very deep level. I came to Austin, I was in absolute poverty. I came here as a single mom with my daughter to go to school to better my life. And, moved up into industry and, finished. I was a volunteer and board member of Safe Place, a battered women's shelter. The number one crime issue in District 4 is domestic violence. And that is something that, kind of brought back to me the stuff that I dealt with many 20-something years ago. And so all of these things coalesced, and just in the different stages that District 4 is in, I've been in my life. I think the other thing that I really learned was how distrusting the district, a lot of people in the district are of the city. They have a lot of issues with the city utilities, getting their water shut off, their electricity shut off by mistake. There was a woman I helped who had gotten her water turned off, and they had said she had tampered with the valve, and there was just a process the city had not followed to verify that she had done that. Her water was off for 2 months. Trying to work through the system with her, trying to get everything taken care of. And code issues. We have a lot of cultures in District 4, and each culture brings their own certain standards of what they think is appropriate. And the code is there to kind of normalize all of that, and a lot of miscommunication and issues with code issues in the district. I think what's needed in District 4 is someone who's very protective, someone that will stand up for the district and have high expectations for the district.
Okay, we're going to have you stop there.
Okay, thank you.
Let's move on to the next question. We'll start with you this time, Laura. What do you think leads to better outcomes for the city? Specific, concrete policy benchmarks, or more general governing philosophies of how a city should be run? Which do you favor and why?
I like the metrics.
Okay.
That's my background. I was a gross margin manager for a $1 billion networking business at Freescale Semiconductor. I've been an engineer. I've been a manager. Different roles I've played, and you really have to understand what the financial limitations are for the city budget. We don't have an infinite amount of money. There's no way. So you have to prioritize what happens, and the policies and the projects that are, that we vote in and as a city council. And so I believe metrics are very important. I think also understanding the struggles that people have, where you have a tactical component of being a city council member in the moment right now, what needs to be done, but also you have to set up kind of a runway for strategic, and you have to do both.
Great.
I definitely would favor putting forward and finding metrics that we can agree to, but understand the metrics sometimes have limitations. So I'll speak to 2 metrics that I think are very important in regards to equity that would benefit District 4 and other neglected parts of town. One, we have often set goals for how often there should be park space and green space within an area, but we oftentimes do not include in the metric how many people there are in each area and how often those folks have yards and green space in their own single-family dwellings. So, for instance, within District 4, we are very little park space, but that is even more exacerbated by the fact that many folks live in dense multifamily housing where they don't have access to green space within their own homes. And so I think there should be better metrics set for issues of how close you should be to green space, where retail and services should be, and where there should be grocery stores. But then, of course, there are places where metrics fail. For example, you can see that the median family income in Austin is growing, and oftentimes this is pointed to as a metric saying that incomes are rising or wages are rising, but the median family income or the average income does not take into consideration the fact that folks have stayed at the bottom for a long time, and importing large numbers of jobs with high salaries will obviously inflate the median and average incomes. And so we can't just look at metrics. We have to have a value system within which we filter all of the decisions we're making as a council. You know very well that the council often is dealing with 120 items any given Thursday. And so we can't have a metric for every single one of those, and the best we can do sometimes is have a strong set of values, but also be flexible enough to compromise with the value sets of other council members.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Hypothetical situation.
Oh, this is fun.
Always is. A developer is in conflict over a project with a local neighborhood group. The city staff prefers one solution, the neighborhood group prefers another. What skills will you use to resolve this and any other conflicts that will no doubt arise between competing interests? Greg.
Certainly. You know, we see these sorts of issues happen at council week after week. And I think what is critical is to work with our neighborhood organizations, particularly within our district, to make sure that they are as reflective of our community as possible. And I believe that through exhaustive conversation between the development interests and our neighborhood groups, that we can get to a better place than we have previously, because an at-large council didn't really have constituents. They've, I won't quote the council member that said it. They said, I didn't feel like I'm responsible particularly to anyone. And I think that council members should serve as mediators, and staff should serve to be able to walk neighborhood organizations through a process so that staff are not bringing forward proposals that are in conflict with the neighborhood's values. But in the end, as a council member, you have to make the final decision. And I would tend to put neighbors' interests first ahead of anyone else's. But of course, if there is no viable solution on the table, then you have to eventually sort of make a decision, and sometimes that means making nobody happy. But that's just part of what the job of being a city council member is. And I would make sure that my values weren't compromised in any sort of decision in the end.
Laura.
Yes, most of the neighborhoods in Austin are governed by their neighborhood plans. So developers will come and propose a development. Either it can be consistent with the neighborhood plan and the future land use map. The future land use maps are codified into city code and city law. So really it governs what developers are permitted to do, because the neighborhood voted and the council voted these future land use maps into existence, and they're kind of what the bounds are. And but we've seen on the council that there have been many waivers and many changes to what the neighborhood plans and the future land use maps are, and that's where the rub is. You know, the council has been very easily influenced by developers and by waivers to certain zoning and codes. This is why we get gentrification, is because the council has upzoned certain districts. They have ignored the compatibility standards that are also city code. And so when you have that, you get gentrification, because you get the upzoning and you get bigger, larger, taxes go up, people move out. East Austin has seen this over and over. You've seen it in South Congress, you've seen it East Riverside, you've seen it in Manor, off of Manor Road where Miller is. So it's a big, big problem. I think the council needs to, this is why the 10-1 happened, because people are really frustrated and they're not happy with how the gentrification and all the issues. So I think compromise is needed. I think if the developer understands that they really have to work with the neighborhoods, there can be a give and take. And I think the neighborhoods are the ones that should drive it. And one other piece I want to talk about is, it's interesting down at City Hall that the development department is driving policy, and that is not appropriate. The council drives policy, and the neighborhood plans, the future land use maps drive kind of the progression of development. And we've seen this on I'm on the Austin Neighborhoods Council, I'm on the Land Development Code Subcommittee, and we have been working with Code Next and trying to reel in the staff. A lot of people think the staff is just, out of their bounds, and in some cases they are. Okay,
I'd like to get you all to talk a minute about compromise. Is there a situation that's appropriate for you values, land use maps, whatever it's going to be to compromise what you're bringing to City Hall. We'll start with, I believe it's your turn, Greg. Oh, I'm sorry, Laura, it's your turn.
Yeah. So my policy is going to be follow what the city code says, which is the future land use maps. Those things are codified into the city ordinances that the previous city councils have voted to approve those. And they define future development, future zoning, if the zoning is not currently the SF3, SF4, SF6 multifamily, limited industrial, whatever, it is on the future land use map. So, my policy would be to follow what was requested. There are processes in place to update the neighborhood plans, and that can happen. So, I think it's really the onus is on the developer to go to the neighborhoods and get their agreement if they want to go off of what the neighborhood plans and what the future land use maps already say.
Okay, Greg.
I do not think compromise is a dirty word, and it has been the way that I've gotten much of the work and advocacy that I've done at City Hall done. I've been really honored to be able to lead efforts and participate in efforts to change over 24 policies on the local level, and I'll give you an example of one. Over 4 years ago, I was tasked with leading an effort to pass an ordinance at the city level to guarantee workers that were working outside in the heat the right to a water break and to a rest break. And this was a nationally unprecedented push, but a UT study had shown that many folks building our beautiful downtown were not allowed to come off the scaffolds and take a drink of water. And there were serious interests on the other side pushing back. And while we did manage to pass the ordinance on a unanimous 7-0 vote, we did make compromises to make sure that those that were up in cranes or those that were taking part in some kinds of non-strenuous labor, that those compromises could be made. And we could have possibly passed it 6-1 or 5-2 without making those amendments or compromises. But it's important to make sure that those relationships stay strong and that we're understanding that there are going to be differences of opinion. As Sarah Eckhart's appointee on the Economic Development Task Force, I sat across the table from the Chamber of Commerce and from contractors associations while I was a workers advocate for months and months, and we managed to come to agreement on 11 out of 12 of the recommendations that we wrote up. And so I think that by understanding that we have more in common than we have different, and oftentimes in the city, I think with the new 10-1, we have an opportunity to sort of restart the conversation, get rid of some of the animosity between traditional interests at City Hall, and find places where we can compromise and move forward.
Okay. Greg and Laura, you each have experience taking issues of personal importance to City Hall. What did you learn from those experiences? What from your past activism translates well to your prospective new job? And what doesn't fit so well? Greg, I think it's your turn to start.
Certainly. So a recent initiative that I worked on was reforming our city's economic development program to make sure that not just those in high-tech jobs, but those working with their hands in construction and in maintenance would also get a share of Austin's prosperity, and make sure that we had decent wages with decent benefits for those who are working for incoming companies as Austin grows. And for us to get that done, I had, there were, of course, folks like the Chamber of Commerce being on the other side of this, it was a difficult task to complete. And so I had to get to know and meet all of the democratic organizations in town, the environmental groups in town, responsible business owners. We got over 40 organizations to sign on to this. And getting to know those folks on the outside as an advocate was so helpful, I believe, for future work as a council member, because I've already developed those relationships, and many of those groups have endorsed my candidacy. Over 40 organizations also have endorsed my candidacy, so that we can begin to build a working relationship on the inside as well as on the outside. And so I think that was very helpful, but I do understand that my relationship is going to have to change as a council member. And so that's something that I look forward to working on and look forward to building relationships with the city staff on the inside.
Okay, Laura.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Sorry, I'm going to have to flip back here real fast. You both have personal experience taking issues of personal importance to City Hall. What did you learn from those experiences? What from your past activism translates to well to your prospective new job, and what doesn't fit so well?
Yeah. There's a lot of things I've taken to City Hall over the last, 3 or 4 years, and I think the one that I'm most proud of is saving $4 million at City Hall with regard to fee waivers. And there was I think it was a $6 million fee waiver that was going to be on the consent agenda at on the council, and I don't know if everybody understands consent agenda, but it's an agenda where you just go ahead and everybody votes on 100 items at one time, and so you don't really get to see the individual details of these 100 items, spending items in some cases, that the council's approving. So there's one item, it was a $6 million fee waiver to the UT Seton Medical School, and it was going to cost us as taxpayers to pay, these were fee waivers for hookups for water and different road usages and everything. And so I'm like, why are we giving a fee waiver when Central Health just raised our taxes for this project of the medical school? So I spoke on it. We had pulled it from consent. Cheryl Cole and Bill Spellman did a phenomenal job. They pulled it. And we had Ora Houston speak and also Paul Robbins speak and educated the council that this fee waiver of $1.5 million was going to have to be paid by the ratepayers. You know, our water department is, you know, we're struggling financially, so we saved $1.5 million. And Bill Spellman made the comment, well, if I knew the previous fee waiver we did several months ago, ratepayers were going to have to absorb those costs, I would have never supported that. And so what the council did, they went back and $2.5 million more they cut from another fee waiver they had approved months ago. So it was $4 million saved in about 20 minutes. And I'm saying, put me on that council for more than 20 minutes. Imagine what we could do. And but that's a big deal, especially with our utility rates are just skyrocketing. We as citizens are paying for these subsidies. The subsidies to these corporations are driving our affordability issues. There are things that go through this council on the consent agenda every week. There needs to be somebody there as a watchdog saying no and protecting us.
Okay. The City of Austin is involved in multiple regional entities, multiple regional agreements. What leadership skills will you rely on as you interact with the city's regional partners? Laura?
Again, I think it goes back to inclusiveness and be able to listen to all sides, even if you don't agree. And you have to get everybody's perspective on the table. And I agree with the compromise. You know, you have to give and take a little bit. But I just think you have to be able to listen to everyone and everyone's perspective. There's always going to be positive and negatives. The other piece that I really would like to do from a metric standpoint, we have projects throughout the city that are multi-million dollars. I would like to add the component of how many Austinites, taxpayers, et cetera, across the city, these projects are going to impact, like a number, a metric of dollars per person. And I think that would be an interesting way to weigh out conflicting priorities.
Okay. Greg?
Sure. So we do have political differences oftentimes with other folks in the region, and I think while it's important for us to be as collaborative as possible with regional entities, we also have to understand that we are the economic driving force of the Central Texas region and act like it. And so I'll give you an example. Our utility rates, folks in Westlake Hills and other parts just outside of Austin are paying lower utility bills, even though they're traditionally more affluent neighborhoods that are putting more strain on our natural resources, are paying lower utility rates than many of the struggling inner city customers here in Austin, and we had to negotiate that during our last rate case. And I believe that it's really important that we be as collaborative as possible in our region, but also understand that that we are responsible to those that need help the most first, and that more affluent suburbs and other regions rely on Austin's economic prosperity and on the working people of areas like District 4 for their own prosperity. And so we need to make sure that we can compromise, but we shouldn't be flimsy at the negotiating table either. Okay,
we got time for one more, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to limit you guys to a sentence each on it, so here we go. At the end of your term, how will your constituents describe your leadership skills and qualities? Greg, you're first. One sentence.
Oh, only one sentence. I'm out then. My goal in running has been not just a policy solution, but I hope that folks will feel that I've helped elevate the voices of those people that are traditionally ignored or forgotten at City Hall.
Okay, Laura?
She listened and she helped us improve our affordability, and we have a 20% homestead exemption and our utility rates went down.
Long sentences, but we'll take them. That's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks to both of you. All of the runoff conversations and our conversation with the newly elected candidates for Districts 2, 5, and 9 will be available on YouTube. Early voting in the runoff election starts December 1st. Election day is December 16th. For KLRU, Leadership Austin, the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life, and KUT, I'm Michael Kanin. Thanks so much for watching. I think you gotta wait a minute.
Support for Civic Summit comes from Google, a global
clear. Thank you
technology
guys very
leader
much.
focused on improving
Good
the
job.
ways people connect with information. And also by Texas Mutual Insurance, providing workers' compensation for Texas employers.